Okay, let the record reflect that the defendant is present along with counsel for the defendant, assistant state attorneys, both sides ready to proceed.
Yes, sir.
Let's return the witness.
While we're doing that, Judge, can I make a humble request?
Yes, sir.
I realize we have a short day tomorrow, but we would request that the court inform the jury that it is due to your honor schedule, not the defense, so
I will
they don't hold it against us.
Did I tell them the reason why?
No, you didn't. No, you didn't, sir.
No. I will gladly do that.
Thank you, sir.
It also occurred to me that the court had discussed at some point saying something to the jury about witness Rodriguez and his not coming back, and I didn't know if you recalled that, but I think at some point we do.
At some point, we're going to need to do that, so y'all might want to consider crafting some language.
We have probably some further inquiry that we'd like to approach on that topic. We're discussing that amongst the team now. So,
you want me to explain to them about the half a day when they come in now? Because I may forget later on.
That's fine.
Okay. Let's return to jury. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Did you heed all of my previous admonitions? Okay. Remember tomorrow, which is Wednesday, we will only work until noon or shortly thereafter. The reason for that is because I have a long-standing commitment for tomorrow at 1. And just to give you a brief explanation, it deals with the state trial court's budget, which I serve on the executive committee of the Trial Court Budget Commission, which is having a meeting here. They have a meeting the next day, which I will miss. But that meeting is very important for the well-being of my circuit. That's where we discuss the distribution of funds for the next year. So I just want to make sure that we are represented when the bargaining begins. Okay? Mr. Byers, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Mr. Ashton, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, Mr. Eichenbaum.
Hello.
Okay, we're going to talk about DNA. Now, sir, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, give them an example of what touch DNA is?
Well, touch DNA means you have all kinds of DNA. Everybody knows about blood, saliva, semen. Touch DNA is DNA which is transferred mainly through the hands. So if I touch an object, I will leave DNA.
Is there different types of touch DNA, or actually, let me rephrase that. That's a poorly asked question. What affects how much DNA when you use touch DNA is left?
There are different factors which will decrease or increase the chance of obtaining a DNA profile. If I touch this table here very slightly, the chance of obtaining a DNA profile is very, very remote. The upper layer of my skin contains DNA cells or contains cells, skin cells. But these skin cells are dying cells. I actually have this in the presentation. I'm not sure.
Your Honor, may we, the witness has a PowerPoint presentation that would assist him as demonstrative aid. May we publish that?
You may. What's the exhibit number for the demonstrative exhibit? Attach the exhibit number.
27.
Okay, it's for demonstrative purposes only. You may.
I don't believe it would be an item in evidence.
It's not in evidence. You just need to have an identification number, Madam Clerk.
So, actually, it's on his. It's a disc. I can.
Okay.
Give you a
We just
disc.
need to reference it at some point. It's a dish, but we just need an ID number for it.
Yes.
Okay.
CI.
and just label it a demonstrative exhibit.
Go ahead and bring it up.
Okay. Just without the slides then.
No, you can bring up your PowerPoint presentation
Oh,
if it helps you. May we publish this to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
You may.
It's visible for you?
Hold on a second. We got to make sure they can see. Can everyone see?
Yeah, it's a delay.
Oh,
Okay, go ahead and explain what we're looking at here.
So, yeah, the first slide was the slide with the common types of DNA everybody knows about and hears about. The second slide is about skin cells, epithelial cells. And these epithelial cells are the covering cells of the organs. But mainly when we talk about touch DNA, we talk about, of course, skin cells from the hands. If we go to the...
So when you say epithelial cells, you're referring to skin cells.
Epithelial cells is every covering cell. That could also be the mucosa from the mouth or the covering cells from the lips or vagina cells. But for touch DNA, yeah, we mainly talk about skin cells from the hands.
Okay.
Where we are
And what are we
interested
looking,
in.
What are we looking at here?
In this slide, you can see the top layer of cells doesn't contain any nucleus. That is the part of the cell where we do get our DNA from. So that means that if I touch something, I will leave this top layer mainly, which is hardly containing no DNA material. And of course, in order to obtain a DNA profile, we need cell material or cells which contain the DNA. If you look a little bit lower below the top layer, you can see that there is, well, you see these kind of square bricks.
And that's this section here that I'm highlighting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So under the pink and under the blue ones, you see this section below that. And in the square, those are cells. In the squares, you see a small oval, round.
That would be this section here, the spiniest layer.
Oh, you're signing on it. Yeah, but also in the granular layer, you see a round circle, and that's what we call the nucleus. And that nucleus, that contains the DNA which we need in order to obtain a DNA profile. So in order to get DNA from skin cells, you can see that if you only have a slight touch, the chance of obtaining a profile is very, very remote. If I apply more force, and of course that happens more often with violent crime than a casual contact where you just touch somebody on the shoulder or touch the doorbell, then the chance of obtaining a DNA profile increases. With blood, saliva, and semen, we all have presumptive tests. These are tests which gives us an indication that blood, saliva, or semen is present.
Would that be like a phenolphthalein test?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. But there are lots of tests like luminol or fate bias for saliva, or it's like phosphatesmo for enzymes which are present in semen. So you have all kinds of tests. The problem for the epithelial cells is that there's no test. So we get into a problem in detecting these cells. One possibility of detecting the cells is using an alternate light source. You see this on CSI all the time. They use a darkened room with the blue light. Well, that's what we call an alternate light source. And then if you wear orange goggles, then body fluids can fluoresce. And especially body fluids like saliva or semen or urine will fluoresce very well. A little bit less or less than these three that I just mentioned is the sweat. Sweat also fluoresces. If you will look under the armpits of a t-shirt, you can see that very well. But sweats from the hands are a problem because there's not coming so much sweat from the hands. So if you touch someone or an object, there will be sweat there, of course, depending on conditions like it's warm outside or I'm heavily sweating.
What about sweat from the face and the forehead? Does that show up fairly well?
Well, it depends. If I just touch it once, it's very difficult. So in a lot of times you don't see it if you if you use the alternate light source. But at least we always try first, also in this case, see if we see certain stains with the alternate light source. And if that is sweat, then that could give an indication that somebody touched the location and maybe left also skin cells there. So you're not detecting the skin cells then, but you're detecting, you try to find sweat. And then you assume, or you make a working hypothesis where you think, okay, where there's maybe sweat, there also could be skin cells. Well, if you don't have that, and in a lot of cases we don't find that, then you have an alternative way of taking samples, and that's why you use a working hypothesis, and you look for locations where force was applied. If, for instance, you have a rape victim and the shirt was torn apart, then you can look at certain locations where you can see, okay, it is very likely, or there is support for hypothesis that this is the location where a perpetrator might have grabbed the shirt and torn it apart. So force was applied, and that also means that the chance of obtaining a profile is bigger. So that's another possibility. Still, you don't know for sure that there's skin cells there, so you have to do the testing in order to find out whether or not you get a profile. Then the second problem which you encounter, it's difficult to find, but it's also very difficult to obtain a DNA profile. As said, these dying cells hardly give a profile. With blood, saliva, and semen, in more than 95% of the cases, you will get a profile. With the skin cells, that's different. It's far less, depending per laboratory, but well, I think 50% would be a high score if you make that as a laboratory. So
let me stop you there. How do you combat these problems? How does a forensic scientist actually find these types of cells and this types of DNA? What kind of tools are available for that?
Well, as I was going to explain, we form the working hypothesis, and then you can use a number of amount of methods in order to obtain cell material or DNA from those cells, even though they're broken down so much.
And how would you go about that?
That's the next slide. The point I want to make here is that the type of contact of force is very important in order to, on the chance of obtaining a profile. And then we have three different types.
So let me see if I understand what you're saying is you end up developing a working hypothesis by taking a look at the scenario and the type of contact and the location where that contact would be. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And starting from there, what do you do next?
Well, this is going into, you don't want to see this about the three types of contact?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Because I think in the Netherlands, at least, we use three types of contacts. And then you have, due to wearing, which of course is very often people wear clothing for a longer time, prolonged time, on a watch. And then you have a forceful grip, which is of course more related to crime scenes and crimes. And then the contact due to touching. Due to wearing, you can understand that there's not so much force applied, of course, when you're wearing your clothing, but there's a prolonged time, and these clothing or items are more or less rubbing against the skin for a prolonged time. So you can understand that over time, so the longer that takes, the more DNA will accumulate, and you get a profile. And then these are a couple of examples like knife handles, clothing, watches, which could give profiles. So this category is the highest category of chance of obtaining a profile. The second category is important for crimes, because if a suspect doesn't know the perpetrator, then, or a victim doesn't know the perpetrator, then of course it would be interesting to know whether or not you could find DNA on locations where a perpetrator might have touched the victim. This is talking about forceful contact. So now I'm not only touching it, but I strangulate someone, or I grab somebody very hard by the arm, or by the shirt, or by the trousers. So I go through the upper layer of the skin cells, the dead skin cells, but then now I come into a layer of skin cells which contain DNA. And then the third one is, I already explained, just a slight touch, a doorbell, a pen in a bank. Those is the worst category of chance of getting a DNA profile. There are a couple of factors which are also important. Some people shed more DNA than other persons. It could be that somebody has a skin disease or somebody is just shedding a little bit more. So a good and a bad shedder means that some people who donated more cell material when they touch something, we call it a good shedder. You also have people which, if they touch something or they even apply force on something, you don't get a profile from. They just don't give enough cells with DNA in order to obtain a profile. As explained earlier, long and short contact, the longer the contact, the bigger the chance of a profile. Strong, weak, also explained. And of course, you can imagine if you have a very rough object, it almost etching your skin, then of course, you will also go to the top layer of the skin cells and you will grab material from the skin which contains DNA. Of course, two separate parts is that a sticky material, for instance, we have a method in which we use tape to collect DNA from clothing. So sticky material, of course, will also help to collect DNA better than just a smooth object which touches something. And
okay. Let me stop you there because I want to try and tie it in a little bit to this case. So let's take a piece of duct tape, for example.
Yes.
If a person were to cut a piece of duct tape, would they have to grip the non-sticky side in conjunction with the sticky side to cut it?
Yeah, if you cut it with your bare hands, then you get two locations. Of course, the sticky side where you have one finger and the other side where we have the other finger.
What type of pressure would be required to cut duct tape?
Well, it's more than a slight touch.
Objection outside his area of expertise is what pressure taken to cut that tape.
Sustain.
Have you had to ever recover DNA from duct tape before?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you find in your experience that you can sometimes get DNA from the non-sticky side?
Well, you have different types of sampling. Mm-hmm. And with the duct tape, if we know a location where, or we have in the working hypothesis location where it was torn off, and you can see that every now and then because the tape is more or less worn out, it's like stretched. Mm-hmm. Then we take a sample, and from those locations we are able to obtain a DNA profile.
Okay, and which side of the duct tape would be the most prone to being able to retrieve a DNA profile from? The sticky side or the non-sticky side?
Well, the sticky side, together with the force, of course, is the best location because then you not only have the force you apply, but also the sticky material, and especially with duct tape, which is known to be very strong adhesive. Yeah, you will collect more DNA, of course.
Now, given the hypothesis that the sticky side of duct tape was applied to someone's face, what would you expect to find in regards to DNA on that?
Objection to hypotheticals not involving all the facts of this case.
Overruled.
Yeah, we had several cases where duct tape was used in robberies and that kind of and homicides as well. And the duct tape or the tapes, because it was not only duct tape, were fit for DNA.
What kinds of cells would a face, if it were covering a mouth and a mouth area, would you expect to see? What kind of cell material gets on that tape?
So if you cover the mouth, then of course the skin around the mouth. But then, as I mentioned earlier, if you cover the lips, the lips are wet, and there are also epithelial cells there. And of those, you all heard about the buccal cells, which are used for reference sample. So there's a lot of DNA in the mouth area. So those buccal cells are also very good for obtaining a DNA profile.
Now, given the scenario and the facts of this case, have you formed an opinion as to whether if duct tape was applied to this child's face, given the fact that it would have been applied forcefully and the stickiness, do you have an opinion as to whether you think DNA could have been collected from this sample?
Objection. Compound question, and there's no clarity as to what facts this witness knows about this case that counsel's asking about.
Overruled.
Go ahead and answer.
Yeah, if the tape was put on the mouth and then was removed, it's about the case or it's just in common. Now, if you would put tape on a face, you would get, it's very likely you would get a DNA profile.
Objection. Counsel, the answer is not responsive to the question about, I could explain more at the bench. He indicated tearing it off, which is not the fact of this case.
Yeah, that's his answer.
Let me ask you it in this way. If you had duct tape placed over someone's face and mouth, and that person died and was placed in a wooded area, even with the elements of an outdoor area, would you still expect to find DNA on that duct tape?
So at the start, of course, if you put it on the face, you would expect quite a lot of DNA there.
Okay.
Of course, the circumstances of in which a sample is contained, and of course I'm talking about the whole duct tape now, if it is in bad conditions, then DNA could break down. But, well, I had it later in the presentation, but of course with the PCR techniques, which are very sensitive, you could expect still to find DNA.
Okay. Go to the section of your presentation, because I want to try and keep it as directed to the issues for the jury. So let's go straight to that portion of your presentation so you can explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury why you have that opinion. Yes.
Okay. So what we do with DNA investigation, we investigate certain locations on different chromosomes. And those chromosomes contain information in which you and I are different. So because of these differences, we can make the difference between certain donors of DNA material on a crime scene, for instance. We amplify DNA, so we don't completely clone a person, but we look at small locations. And if you look at this picture, we have these small locations in the nucleus, on the chromosomes, where we do DNA investigations on. And what we do is we amplify those small locations. So now we have, with standard conditions, millions of copies of these couple of DNA or fragments which are present in the sample. So you start out with taking a sample, for instance, from the tape. You cut out a piece, or the FBI did swap a location. And then we have very little DNA. So what we always do is we amplify the fragments of interest. And that's what you see over here. You get all these fragments and we amplify them. Normally that's done between the 28 and 30 cycli, which means we have 28 to 30 amplification steps of these small particles of DNA. And then at the end, if there was DNA present in your tube, this DNA is amplified. Is that answering your question here?
Yes, go on.
In order to make it a little bit more clear, is that we can, theoretically, one cell is enough to get a DNA profile, not with standard conditions. So let's say between 50 and 100 cells are enough under standard conditions to obtain a DNA profile. That means that you cannot see it. So in this picture, you see a slide. Well, you don't see, You cannot see what's on the slide, but still, if you look under a microscope, you would see cells, and that would be more than enough to obtain a DNA profile from.
Now, let me stop you there, because I want to stay on the duct tape for a moment. Now, were you made aware that there were 2 partial profiles on this duct tape, specifically the Q63 duct tape that's been admitted into evidence? Evidence 302. My question to you, there were 2 partial profiles, one on the non-sticky side and one on the sticky side. Take this hypothetical for a moment. If on the, and now I'm only speaking about the non-sticky side, if the non-sticky side was contaminated, is there a possibility that that contamination could override DNA that's already there?
If you have large amounts of DNA, then it is possible to that you don't see peaks or alleles, what we call them, from small amounts of DNA.
And did you have an opportunity to look at how much DNA was there from the contamination?
The contamination peaks were around 150 RVUs. I have that in explanation later, but that's the RVU is a measurement which DNA scientists use in order to get an indication about the amount of DNA. And 150 is not very high.
Okay. So is there the possibility that there could be lower DNA masked by that, or does that rule that out completely altogether?
No, it's never ruled out. And what you see is that there's some disbalance in some of the peaks, which can mean that DNA of another person is present. But this disbalance can also be there because of the low amounts of DNA.
Okay. Do you have an opinion on that at all, as to whether that's possible, likely, or anything like that?
Well, I would have investigated the evidence a little bit further.
Not responsive to the question.
Sustain.
Okay. All right, let's go to the non-sticky, to the sticky side. Are you aware that there was a 17 allele identified at the D3 marker?
Yes.
Okay. And when I say marker, I'm referring to a location that is tested for DNA, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And a 17 allele, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that is?
Well, an allele could be described as an appearance on a certain locations, what already mentioned, the marker location on a chromosome. And the alleles are the appearances in which you and I differ. So, that's written down in reports very often as numbers. And you and I have the different numbers. So that's what it more or less contains.
Now, do you show how much DNA, how many RFUs are at from that 17 allele?
I have it in the presentation.
Okay, can you bring that up? Okay, what are we looking at here? It looks like some kind of a heart monitor.
Yeah. On the picture, you see different peaks. and the peaks which has a number, or the amelogenin, which is the
sex chromosome.
Yeah, the location where you can see the sex type of the donor of the DNA.
Okay.
So the computer is analyzing the data and is assigning these data. And what happened is that there was an assignment with the 17 and with the X location on amelogenin.
Now, because these are at such low amounts, is there limited information that you can get from this?
Yes, of course. What we try to do is to obtain full profiles. So the more information, a normal peak profile or electropherogram contains much more peaks with much more numbers below them. And that would, of course, give much more information about the donor of such a profile than if you have only one or two alleles.
Do you have an opinion after examining this electropherogram whether this is what is called an artifact, or is it or can you determine whether it's human DNA?
It's a small amount, but looking at this electropherogram, that I would say it's caused by human DNA.
Okay. Now, have you ever had the experience in being able to extract DNA from maggots or flies?
Yes.
Explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that's done.
When the maggots feed on human material, then it's possible, of course, that in the digestive system, if they feed on, for instance, blood, then of course there's cell material in there which contains DNA. If they consume that and it's in their system, then it's not completely digested at the beginning. So when you dissolve or extract the DNA from this complete insect or from the larvae, then it is possible that you obtain a DNA profile.
Okay. And tell me what kind of effect chloroform would have on being able to extract DNA, or would it degrade DNA in any way?
No, one of the methods used for DNA extraction is the phenol chloroform extraction. It's not so often used in Europe, but it's quite often used in the United States. And in that method, DNA is extracted with the help of chloroform and phenol.
Okay, so chloroform would never be able to affect being able to actually extract DNA that may be there.
I would not say never, of course. If you put DNA in a bottle of chloroform, that wouldn't help the DNA. But it's not that if you apply a little bit of chloroform, which is of course a volatile substance, that your DNA would be broken down like you have with chloride. So that's the difference.
Okay, I have no further questions, Judge.
Cross-examination.
Sir, if you could just leave that up there for me. Sir, do you have a PhD?
No.
In fact, you're presently a student.
Oro.
You're presently a student at the University of Denver seeking your PhD. Is that correct?
Correct.
Under the supervision of two other professors who are experts in the area of touch DNA, correct?
They are not experts on the touch DNA.
Oh, what is their area of expertise?
They're in the biology department.
Well, I mean, I assumed that, but what is their area of expertise? They're your PhD advisors, right?
Yes.
What is their area of expertise?
Well, Dr. Phil Danielson does forensic DNA, and is mitochondrial DNA, for instance.
Right. And you're under their tutelage trying to earn your PhD.
Yes.
Okay. Your laboratory that you've discussed, the one in Holland, the one that you became the director of, you and your wife started that, correct?
Correct.
Sort of a mom and pop situation, just the two of you, I'm sorry, that's an American expression, I'm probably, in other words, the two of you started it and you were the entire company, the two of you?
No, actually the IFS was started with my wife and a co-worker from the National Lab.
So,
And I joined in 2005.
okay, so three of you.
Yes.
Okay. And your laboratory is actually in a converted barn. Is that correct? Correct?
Part, we bought a farm and we rebuilt the farm.
Right. And you converted and retrofitted it, the barn, in order to make it into a DNA lab. You have, secure facilities and all that kind of thing.
Yes, so
In the
we
barn.
changed everything into a normal DNA facility, which is accredited as well.
Right. Now, in 2008, approximately, you and your wife decided to expand your business to the United States, correct?
Yeah,
And this was a business decision because there's a great deal more work potential in the United States than there is in Holland, correct?
you have more homicides over here, yes.
And you would agree, would you not, that the exposure that your company, that hasn't started yet, will get in this case is going to be extremely helpful to the future of that business venture? Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I'm not so sure about that, but we already work in the United States, in more than 7 states, and we're very busy with cases, so we're not really waiting on cases. The cases have to wait till we are finished. Our turnover times are more than half a year. So, no, we don't really need a lot of more attention.
But your laboratory isn't even open yet, is it?
No, in the United States.
In the United States?
The cases which we work on in the United States, we still do that from the Netherlands.
Right. And when you open your laboratory in Colorado, in the United States, it would be really nice to have a lot of work, wouldn't it?
We already have a lot of work, so actually we're trying to downscale it a little bit.
I see. And you're, the more work you get, obviously the more money you and your wife make on the new project, correct? And that's why you opened it.
Well, we're not really working always for the money. We have cases which we did for free, and so we rather work for in the way that we can work like we want to work. So we want to be able to work the way we want to do. And if we business-like, if we wanted to expand, we could have expanded way much more than we did now. But the problem is, it's very difficult to get good DNA scientists which can do this contact DNA, which we do a lot, in the way we want it. So we choose to be not too big.
Do you do something that's different than other laboratories? Let me strike that and ask another question. How many laboratories are there in the United States that do the same thing that you do?
I think it's growing now. I know that Body Technology tries to do something about contact DNA. I know that the American New York laboratory started to do contact DNA, also use low copy number DNA. And also the laboratory in Denver is start using more sensitive methods like we use.
Now, Bode Laboratory, that's a large laboratory. That's not a laboratory in a barn. It's a large concern.
Laboratory, yes.
Okay. So there are a number of laboratories in the United States that could do exactly the same thing that you do.
I don't agree. I think we have more experience than the other labs.
Explain to the jury what you mean by that. I mean,
well, with this contact DNA and touch DNA, objects which were worn by victims, what happened is that in, I think the first time we started with that in the Netherlands was 1997. And in 2000, the United Kingdom, or before 2000, but in 2000 we started research on low copy number DNA. The low copy number DNA means that you have the amplification, but you do more amplification cycles than the standard methods use. In the United States, this method was, well, actually not used, I think, till recently. In 2002, we validated the method, and in the National Lab, I was working on high-profile cases, and I used it in every case which I couldn't not solve So if we don't have DNA results, and very often then, if there was contact between a victim and a perpetrator, what you start doing is looking for contact DNA. But in order to do this contact DNA, you needed low copy number, especially in that time, to work more sensitive. Well, that didn't happen in the United States, and therefore, I think in the United States, the main state laboratories used mainly DNA from blood, saliva, or semen. But at that time, because I worked all these difficult crimes, we got a lot of experience with this contact DNA.
Did you invent the protocol and process of low copy number DNA?
No.
Where was that invented?
I think the Forensic Science Society laboratory, which is currently closing, I think, but I think they started the experiments.
Where is that?
United Kingdom.
You use a particular, do you use a particular kit or protocol that you purchase from some location in order to do this low copy number DNA you're talking about?
Well, in principle, you can use every DNA kit because the method is only amplifying more than the standard number of amplification cycles. So you can do it with every kit. We use different kits, especially the last couple of years, some new kits came on the market which are more sensitive.
And you buy those from Applied Biosystems Incorporated,
That's correct.
which is an American company, correct?
That's correct.
Now, let's talk for a minute. You said you can do things other people can't. Explain, let me strike that. The only thing you do extra is you run additional runs of let me start back again. PCR is the process of replication of DNA, correct?
Correct.
Normally, you said, I think in one of your slides here, normally it's a run of 26 to 30 runs of this replication process.
28 to 30, yes.
Okay, 20. And the way that works is it takes, basically the first run takes one intact cell of DNA, one intact strand of DNA, and creates a copy. So it makes 2.
Yes.
Right? Next run, the 2 becomes 4.
Yes.
4 becomes 8.
Yep.
8 becomes 16.
Yes.
And beyond that, my math skills fail me.
30 to 120.
Right, exactly. So by doing this 20, 22, 25 times, you make hundreds of thousands of copies of this DNA.
Idealistically, of course.
That's what part, sorry?
Idealistically, of course.
Idealistically, right.
The problem with forensic samples is very often they're not like in a hospital. They're more difficult. There's debris or dirt in there which can inhibit the reaction. So you have to take that in consideration. That's why I also say they already, laboratory, were able to get a profile from one cell, but forensic